You don't build a $2 billion airport in a swamp, especially not in one of the wettest cities on Earth. But India did. It took 25 years to open, and just before launch, it flooded. Let's start with a number. In the financial year 2024 to 2025, Mumbai's existing airport, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport, handled 55.1 million passengers, a new record, the highest in its entire history. That sounds impressive. The problem is that the airport was designed for 50 million. Mumbai's airport is already operating beyond its maximum capacity, every single day. And there's no room to expand. The airport sits inside a city of over 20 million people. On every side, apartment towers, highways, dense neighborhoods. There is nowhere to add a runway, nowhere to build a new terminal. The airport is boxed in by a metropolis that grew around it over decades. Now zoom out and look at what's happening to Indian aviation overall. India is now the third largest aviation market in the world by domestic departures, according to IATA. It reached that milestone in 24 years, ahead of where analysts expected. And in June 2023, Indigo, India's dominant carrier, placed an order for 500 aircraft with Airbus, the single largest aircraft purchase order in the entire history of commercial aviation. Think about what that means. One airline in one country, betting that demand will be so enormous for so long that they need to lock up half a decade of Airbus production capacity just to keep up. By 2044, IATA projects India's annual passenger traffic will grow by an additional 425 million journeys, almost tripling 2024 levels. And sitting at the center of all of this is Mumbai, India's financial capital, the country's largest commercial hub, the gateway for foreign investment and international business. When Mumbai's aviation infrastructure fails to keep up, it doesn't just inconvenience travelers, it creates friction in the whole economy. The math is simple. The existing airport is full. Demand is growing faster than almost anywhere on Earth. You cannot expand the old airport, and so the only answer is build somewhere new. The question was where? Mumbai is a narrow peninsula. Land costs rank among the most expensive on Earth. Every square kilometre is already spoken for. But about 35 kilometers to the southeast, across Thane Creek, engineers identified a potential site, a stretch of coastal land near a suburb called Ulway in Navi Mumbai. There was just one problem. The site was, in almost every way, the worst possible place to build an airport. When planners first surveyed the Ulway site in the late 1990s, the project was originally conceived in 1997. Here is what they found. Thousands of acres of mangrove forest, protected under India's coastal regulation zone laws. You cannot simply bulldoze mangroves in India. Each clearance requires detailed environmental review, legal sign-off from multiple government bodies, and a compensatory replanting program. Rivers crossing the site, floodplains that expand dramatically during the 4-month monsoon season, rolling hills that needed to be leveled to create viable runway surfaces, soft, compressible coastal soil beneath it, all the kind that shifts and settles when you pour millions of tons of concrete on top of it. This wasn't just difficult terrain. It was terrain with legal protection, ecological sensitivity, and a community of farmers and fishing families who had been living on that land for generations, all of which had to be navigated often through the courts before a single piece of heavy machinery could break ground. The airport was first proposed in 1997. That's not a typo either. For nearly 2 decades, the project existed primarily on paper, stalled by environmental lawsuits, land acquisition disputes, funding gaps, and changes in government. A construction consortium was finally awarded the contract in 2017. The foundation stone ceremony was held in February 2018. But full construction didn't begin until August 2021, after the project was restructured as a joint venture between Sidco, the state development body, and Adani Airport Holdings. The Adani Group took operational control in 2021 through a special purpose vehicle called Navi Mumbai International Airport Limited, or NMIAL. Construction was carried out by Larsen & Toubro, one of India's largest engineering firms. Then there were the people. Around 3,500 families, farming communities and fishing villages, spread across 10 villages, lived on land earmarked for the airport. Their displacement was one of the most politically sensitive chapters of the entire project. In fact, the airport is now named after the man who spent his life fighting for those families. Lokneta DB Patil Dinkar Balu. Patil was a social activist and farmer leader who became famous for ensuring that displaced communities received fair compensation and rehabilitation from major infrastructure projects. He is a revered figure in Navi Mumbai, When the airport opened in October 2025, it was officially inaugurated as Lokneta DB Patil Navi Mumbai International Airport. Think about that for a moment. The airport is named after the activist who spent decades fighting for the people the airport displaced. That's a complicated, deeply human story that the glossy press releases don't often mention. Let's talk about what it actually took to build this. The site spans 1,160 hectares for the airport itself, with roughly 2,900 hectares of land total involved in the project. Ulway Hill alone once stood at 96 meters. Engineers reduced it to 10 meters through controlled blasting, using the excavated material to level and raise the overall site. The Ulway River was diverted 90 degrees into a new 3.2-kilometer flood-safe channel directed into the Mohar Creek. The entire site platform was raised by 5.5 meters above its original level. The soft coastal soil required deep foundation work to support the weight of runways, terminals, and aircraft. The result is a single runway, 3,700 meters long, oriented northeast-southwest, capable of handling the largest commercial aircraft in service today. The terminal design takes its cue from the lotus flower, a design that will only be fully complete once all three interconnected terminal buildings are finished across multiple phases. Phase 1, which opened in December 2025, gives the airport the capacity to handle 20 million passengers a year. The project cost is approximately 16,700 crore rupees, roughly $2 billion at current exchange rates. Some updated estimates put Phase 1 alone at closer to 19,600 crore as costs evolve through construction. But here's how that money is structured. This airport is not being built all at once. It's being built in phases across roughly a decade. Phase 1, now open, gives 20 million passengers a year and a single runway. Phase 2, targeted for completion around 2030, will add a second runway and push capacity to approximately 25 million. By the time all phases are complete, expected around 2032, the airport is projected to handle 90 million passengers annually, making it one of the largest aviation hubs in South Asia. Who actually runs this airport? Here's something most reports gloss over, and it matters. The airport is operated by Navi Mumbai International Airport Limited, a joint venture between SIDCO, the Maharashtra state development body, holding a 26% stake, and Adani Airport Holdings, which holds the remaining 74%. The Adani Group, by 2025, already operated multiple major Indian airports, including Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Lucknow, and Guwahati. Navi Mumbai extends that footprint further. This makes the airport part of a much larger story about the concentration of India's aviation infrastructure in private hands, and specifically in the hands of one of India's most prominent business groups. For viewers who follow Indian geopolitics, this is worth noting. The question of who controls critical infrastructure and whether that control is appropriately regulated is a live debate in India. The Navi Mumbai airport doesn't exist in isolation. It's a node in a much larger private infrastructure empire. Let's be specific about who gains from this airport opening. Airlines gain immediately. Mumbai's existing airport has been slot constrained for years. Airlines simply could not get permission to add new flights because there was no space in the schedule. A second airport breaks that bottleneck. New carriers, new international routes, and more competition all become possible. Real estate developers in Navi Mumbai gain enormously. The land value around a major international airport rises dramatically, and it had already been rising for years in anticipation of this opening. Logistics parks, hotel clusters, and commercial developments are being planned along the airport's periphery. The Maharashtra state government gains both economically and in terms of regional development. Navi Mumbai was originally built in the 1970s as a planned relief city for Mumbai's congestion. The airport finally delivers on that original promise, making Navi Mumbai a destination and economic hub in its own right, rather than just a dormitory suburb. And India gains strategically. There is an intensifying competition among Asian hub airports, Dubai, Singapore, Doha, Hong Kong, for dominance in international transit traffic. India has historically been underserved in this market. A modern, high-capacity airport in Mumbai starts to change that equation. One more thing worth noting, this airport is connected. The Mumbai Trans-Harbour Link, a 21.8-kilometre sea bridge linking South Mumbai to the Navi Mumbai shore near the airport, became operational in early 2024. It cuts travel time from central Mumbai to the airport to around 20 to 25 minutes. A metro line connecting the two Mumbai airports is also planned, creating a direct transit link between the old hub and the new one. Before we talk about the long-term climate question, let's start with a piece of news that perfectly captures the tension at the heart of this project. The inauguration of Loknath DB Patil Navi Mumbai International Airport was originally scheduled for the 30th of September 2025. It was postponed because of heavy rain. An airport built in a flood-prone wetland, designed specifically to handle Mumbai's monsoon conditions, had its opening ceremony delayed by a monsoon. You cannot write this stuff. The inauguration eventually took place on the 8th of October 2025, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi flew in aboard the VVIP presidential aircraft. Commercial flights began on December 25th. But the delay wasn't just ironic. It was a preview of the central question this airport will face for the rest of its operational life. Mumbai receives more than 2,000 millimeters of rainfall a year, with the vast majority concentrated in just a few weeks of peak monsoon. In extreme years, Mumbai has received over 900 millimeters in a single 24-hour period. That happened in 2005, when catastrophic flooding killed hundreds of people and paralyzed the city for days. Events of comparable severity have happened since. The Navi Mumbai site sits in a region that is particularly exposed to this kind of flooding. The rivers that were managed and rerouted during construction carry enormous volumes of water. CIDCO's engineering studies resulted in the entire airport platform being raised to +8 meters above sea level, specifically designed to withstand a 100-year flood cycle, including events comparable to the catastrophic 2005 Mumbai deluge. But here's the uncomfortable truth about infrastructure designed for extreme events. The definition of extreme keeps changing. India's coastline faces serious sea level rise risk over the coming decades. The IPCC AR6 report projects global mean sea level rise by 2100 of between 0.28 and 0.55 meters under low emission scenarios, rising to between 0.63 and 1.01 meters under high emission scenarios. For India's coastline specifically, peer-reviewed research using AR6 data projects a range of 25 to 110 centimeters by 2100, depending on the emissions pathway. 1 meter of sea level rise doesn't flood a well-elevated airport directly, but it raises the baseline on which every storm surge and tidal flood event is built. A monsoon flood that today peaks at a manageable level becomes significantly more dangerous when the underlying sea is permanently higher. There's also a subsidence issue. Parts of the Navi Mumbai coastal zone are built on soft sedimentary deposits that compact slowly under heavy infrastructure loads. This can reduce the effective elevation of structures over time, even as the sea level climbs to meet them. CIDCO and Adani have both stated that climate resilience was factored into the airport's design. The platform was raised to +8 meters. Drainage is engineered for the 1-in-100-year flood scenario. But critics, including serious urban planning academics, raise a structural concern. Most Indian infrastructure projects use historical flood data to calibrate their systems. And historical data is an increasingly unreliable guide to future conditions, because the climate events we're now experiencing regularly exceed the historical record. The 2005 floods were described as a once-in-a-century event. Mumbai has experienced comparable flooding multiple times since. There is no easy answer here. You cannot pause India's development until climate science provides perfect certainty about future flood scenarios. That certainty isn't coming. But the question of whether this airport was built to last 50 years or 100 years, and whether the engineering assumptions baked in are robust enough to survive a changing monsoon climate, is a legitimate one. And it's one that will follow this project for decades. Here's why this matters beyond one airport in one Indian city. Across Asia, trillions of dollars of new infrastructure is being concentrated in coastal zones that climate scientists identify as high risk over the next half-century. Jakarta, Dhaka, Ho Chi Minh City, Manila, Colombo. The logic is always the same. Flat coastal land is available, accessible, and cheaper. The strategic position is right. The economic case is compelling. What these projects are collectively doing is creating enormous long-term exposure. Not a crisis today, but a compounding set of risks that will land hard on the infrastructure that gets built now, by the time it reaches midlife. Is it possible to build resilient infrastructure in flood-prone coastal zones? Yes, Singapore and the Netherlands have demonstrated that with the right engineering investment and ongoing maintenance, the question for India is not whether it can be done. It's whether it's being done with enough rigor, enough long-term funding for maintenance, and enough genuine engagement with the climate scenarios that its own engineers will have to manage across the century. Let's zoom out one final time. India is on track to become the world's third largest economy by the early 2030s. Its aviation market is projected to nearly triple in size by 2044. Mumbai generates a disproportionate share of India's foreign investment, export revenue, and international business activity. If Mumbai's aviation system cannot absorb this growth, the cost is not just measured in delayed flights. It's measured in slower investment, higher logistics costs, and a diminished ability to compete with the cities in the Gulf, in Southeast Asia, that are actively building the infrastructure to capture India's international connectivity instead. From that perspective, building this airport, even in complicated terrain, even at serious cost, even with climate questions hanging over it, was not a strategic choice. It was a structural necessity. The real question, as always with megaprojects, is not whether to build, it's whether to build right. India has a long history of megaprojects that were announced with great fanfare, stalled for decades in legal and bureaucratic limbo, and either died or arrived so late they were irrelevant. This airport took 25 years from concept to opening. That's a long time, but it is open. It is operating. The first Indigo flight from Bengaluru landed at 8 a.m. on Christmas morning, 2025. That matters, because the India that approved this project in the late 1990s is a different country from the India that opened it in 2025. The India of today has built the world's largest metro network. It has developed one of the world's most used digital payment platforms. It has launched space missions to the moon. It is a country with dramatically more capacity to execute at scale than it had a generation ago. But capacity to execute and wisdom about what to execute and how are two different things. The Navi Mumbai airport is an expression of both at once. In a city running out of land, sometimes the only place left to build is the one nobody wants. That's the logic that drove 25 years of planning, litigation, displaced families, rerouted rivers, and $2 billion of construction. And the airport, named after the man who fought for those displaced families, is now open, sitting in the wetland, handling the flights, processing the passengers. It is imperfect. It is late. It carries the weight of every compromise that was made to get it built. But the question it poses is one every nation building at scale will have to answer. Can you build the infrastructure of the future on land that the future might take back? If you want to understand how Asia's most ambitious megaprojects are reshaping global trade and which ones could change everything, subscribe, because next time we're going to Thailand. The government there is planning to build a land bridge that would let ships bypass the Strait of Malacca entirely. Thailand's land bridge, the infrastructure that could bypass the Strait of Malacca. That story is next.